The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Kanban for software development, get more with less. And our guest speaker today is Manoj KG. He is the director with Team SUCCESSO Software Private Limited. Manoj is the founder and director of Team SUCCESSO Software, which provides cloud solutions to small and medium enterprises. He has 14 years of industry experience and is a certified CSP and PMP. His expertise is in project delivery of enterprise, J2EE projects, Agile, lean practices. In his previous professional stint, he led the product development team at Research IT, Monsanto. Manoj is passionate about lean methodologies, organizational behavior development, and XP engineering practices. So, without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Manoj.
Good afternoon, everyone. Aradhana, am I here audible?
Your voice is loud and clear. You can continue, Manoj.
Okay. So, welcome to the webinar on Kanban for software development. As Aradhana introduced me, my name is Manoj. I'm the founder and director of Team SUCCESSO. We are a startup focusing on providing cloud solutions for small and medium enterprise. And we use Kanban extensively for the software development that happens in-house. So during this presentation, the agenda the concepts that we are going to discuss, and that's what I'm going to kind of share, is heavily influenced by three books. The Toyota Way and the Lean Thinking. These are more generic in nature. But if you don't have the time for all the three books, I would definitely recommend you to Kanban. David J. Anderson, the author of Kanban, is the person who introduced Kanban into the software development. So that might be a good start if you feel Kanban is right for your organization and if you want to learn more about Kanban. So let's start by setting the agenda for the presentation. We'll be starting with talking about the history of Kanban. We'll spend some time to understand the lean principles, and then we'll get it introduced into Kanban and how it's being used in software development. We'll look at the practices in Kanban and how Kanban might be a best fit in certain scenarios, specifically when you are doing event-driven development. We'll look at advantages with the Kanban, and we'll close the presentation with implementing how to go about in implementing Kanban. And the last 5 to 10 minutes we'll keep for question and answer sessions. So if you have any questions, request you to kind of send it to us. We'll take up the questions at the end of the session. So as we mentioned, before the Kanban got introduced into the software development, it was being used heavily in the manufacturing industry. The origin of Kanban happened in the Toyota production system, where Toyota used the plastic envelope cards, which they used to call as Kanban card, as a way of signaling the need to create or move inventory. So one of the basic objectives of Kanban in Toyota manufacturing system is to ensure that the wastage which comes due to the overproduction is avoided. So what you can see in the screen is a Kanban board which is there in one of the manufacturing industries. It's not from Toyota, I think it's from Yamaha, where they use the Kanban board to manage the flow of work. So let's try to understand a little bit more in details about how a Kanban basically helps you to eliminate the wastage which comes due to the overproduction. So one of the fundamental concepts which is being part of the Kanban in a Toyota production system was the pull system. This was slightly different compared to what used to exist in their competitors, which was more focused on a push-based system. So in a push-based system, work basically flows from the top to bottom, and the decision in terms of what needs to be done is taken at a higher level. So if you can see the animation here, it's basically represent the production lane, and in the station 1, which is upstream, if there is a need for an inventory, that inventory needs to be decided more from a understanding of a management about how much is the need for the inventory there. So what usually happens is that you might basically produce a lot of inventory for the station 1, but at the same time downstream in station 4, you might not have the capacity to build enough cars which needs all the inventory that's getting introduced in station 1. So in a way, you are introducing inventories into the system which are not going to be used. As a result of that, the organization would need to maintain those inventory, which is going to introduce cost into the system. So the question was how you can eliminate the wastage that is getting introduced due to the overproduction of inventories. So in Toyota, any manufacturing request used to get driven by an order that happens from a client. So when a client basically makes a request for manufacturing of a car, the station 4, which is the last stage in the pipeline, triggers the Kanban card for the station 3, which is the station which is just one level up in the pipeline. So station 3, based on the demand, it goes from the station 4, raises the Kanban card further to the station which is upstream. So where work used to get pushed from top to bottom in the earlier model, in a Toyota way, the work used to be get pulled from the station which is in downstream from the upstream stations. So how does this basically help you to avoid the overproduction? So I have another slide which try to kind of look at the same scenario but in a slightly different way. So here there is an upstream process which produces the product and which gets stored in a store. Usually there will be a limit and you try to maintain the minimum just-in-time inventory in your store. And once that limit is accomplished, the upstream process stops producing any more of the inventory. Now whenever there is a demand from the market driven by your customers which comes to your downstream process, it raises a Kanban card and pulls things from the store into the downstream process. So once this inventory moves into the downstream process, and based on the Kanban card that the upstream process received, upstream process makes a decision about how much more inventory it needs to produce. As a result of this, the number of inventory that's created and maintained in the store at any point of time is maintained at an optimal level. So this not only allows Toyota to maintain an inventory in the most effective way, it also helps Toyota to make changes drastically so that it can basically modify its assembly line in the way it can produce the maximum value to the customer. So if the customer wants brand X this time, and if there is a demand for a different brand, it doesn't require Toyota that much time to shift to the new assembly line without creating a lot of wastage in terms of the inventory which is not going to get used. So that's basically comes under the fundamental principles of lean principles, where you will start first looking at what is the value for your customer is. So in a car manufacturing, in the production pipeline of a car manufacturing, the value is going to be the customer getting the car which he ordered. Now once you know what is the value for your customers, you define the various stages which will help you to accomplish those value. So once you identify those steps which will provide you that value, those steps which are not really adding value is getting eliminated. As those steps are not really adding into your production pipeline and actually creating wastage by producing inventory which is not being used. Now once you know what are the various stages involved in creating the value, you create a tight sequence flow so that there is a flow. So when you define the flow, you have an objective of creating a flow which moves smoothly across the various stages in the pipeline, as well as you have an objective of creating a flow which will help you to move a product from the initial stages all the way till the end stages in the most effective way. Now, once you define the flow, you will introduce the pull which will help you to create a flow which is smooth as well as which takes the least time to move from a point A to point B. So once all these 4 steps are accomplished, you can always consistently go back and look at your process chain and try to identify where is the bottleneck which, if eliminated, will help you to improve your flow and create a more optimized system. So this more or less continue as an ongoing process, and over a period of time you will be able to introduce an evolutionary change which improve your process in a incremental manner. Now that's about the production system. Now the question is how this principle would basically apply into a software development methodologies. So most of the Agile software development methodology, whether it is Scrum or Kanban, is heavily influenced by the lean principles. Scrum uses the concept of pull. Kanban uses the concept of pull, whether it is XP. Most of the software development methodology try to use the concepts from the lean methodology and specifically pull. So what differentiates Kanban compared to the other software development methodology is its focus on 2 aspects. From the definition of David J. Anderson, who introduced Kanban into the software development methodology, the focus of Kanban is to produce incremental and evolutionary process and system change. So when you are basically trying to implement Kanban, your objective is to not change your current process or change the current practices. What you are looking at, try to understand the current process and how the flow basically happens in your current process, and then start incremental and evolutionary process and system changes. And the way Kanban try to accomplish this is by introducing the constraint so that your bottlenecks in the flow gets visible to you, and you have ways of removing that bottlenecks, and so that your flow becomes smoother as well as faster. The other advantage that Kanban basically brings into your software development process is by helping you to prioritize. So when basically you have limiting what you can do, it forces you to pick up the items which brings more value to your customers. So your focus consistently becomes providing the maximum value to the customers by picking up the features or the enhancement which adds the maximum value. Second, by introducing the constraints in the various stages in your flow, you will be able to uncover the bottlenecks. And consistently by uncovering the bottlenecks and trying to resolve that, you are improving your process and thereby being able to introduce or provide value to your customers in a shorter period of time. So in one single statement, the focus on Kanban is to improve the flow, and the flow is the king from a Kanban perspective. So how would you get a flow which is smooth and as well as fast? So one of the constraints or one of the challenges is the number of tickets or the features that usually get into your software development cycle. Kanban forces you to stop starting more tickets or more feature or more stories, and instead of that prevents the number of working items in progress at any point of time and forces you to focus on finishing items faster. So if you don't finish the items which is there already in your pipeline, you might not be picking up any more items from the upstream. So the focus in Kanban is to help a feature which gets into your software development pipeline to reach the customers in the most effective way and the most efficient way. So the focus is always going to stop starting and to start finishing whatever you have picked up. And how basically this is accomplished in Kanban. Kanban suggests 5 practices for you, which starts by visualizing your flow. We already covered the various steps involved in lean practices in the slide before. So visualization is a very important component which helps you to understand your flow. Then you limit or introduce constraints where you limit the work in progress items in each of the various stages which produces value for your customers. Then you look at your flow and look at various ways where you can optimize your flow, where you can smoothen your flow. But all this to happen, you need to know what are the process policies explicit. We know that every item that getting into your software development pipeline might not be of the same type. So you need to have a very clear process policies explicitly mentioned. And finally, once you have accomplished the 4 steps, that gives you an opportunity to improve collaboratively. So this is a high-level view of the core practices in Kanban. What we will do now is we'll pick up one at a time and then try to kind of understand how you can do that in your software development. We'll start with visualizing of your workflow. So this is an example of a workflow that we use where we have items which goes to the various value stream maps, starting with the new items which is coming into the development, then it moves into an analyzed state. From there it moves to the development and then to test and finally to the done state. So when we are visualizing this workflow, one of the most critical component is the various value stream maps which is involved in creating the value. So for us the various stages are the different states which are involved in when your work items moves across the software development pipeline. So once you define your value stream maps, the second step involved is you need to have an owner for each of the work items. So you assign, there will be a name or a person associated with the work items that is there in the various different stages in your value stream. The other important component in the visualization of the workflow is the various different type of the work items that's going to come into your bucket. All of the work items that's going to come into your bucket might not be of equal priority. So you might be using a color coding or any other aspects to kind of differentiate the different type of the work items that's going to come into your workflow. Now how you can use the visualization? There are many ways many team does that. Some of the team uses the sticky notes and physical wall to basically represent this. There are definitely a lot of advantages associated with that. Some of the teams uses electronic tools which helps you to kind of visualize this workflow. The example that you see on your screen is from a tool. This works well for you, especially if you're working in a distributed environment where you have team members across the geographies. A visual workflow in an electronic tool might be more effective. So regardless of whatever be the tool that you use, it's important to understand what are the various value stream maps involved in creating the value for your end customers, a way to identify the owner of your work items, and way to differentiate various different type of work items that's there in your visual dashboard. So once you define your visual dashboard, the second step involved in limiting the number of work items which can be there in each state. So why is limiting the work in progress items in each state is so important? So we talked about introducing the constraints so that you will be able to understand and optimize the flow. You will be able to understand the constraints and optimize the flow. So let's take an example which is commonly referred is that of a road. in a road, the objective you're using a road is to help you to move from a point A to point B. So if you're going from your office to your home, one of the primary value for you to reach in using a car is to reach your home in the most effective way, in the most shortest time. So the best way you can get that is if your car is the only car in the road. But you know that's not economical and you are not really getting the maximum value of the capacity that the road is providing you. So you can keep adding more cars into the road, and as you know, it usually doesn't really impact you till you reach a specific point. Maybe it might be 50% or 60%. And when the cars are basically utilizing 60% capacity of the road, you will start seeing your time which you take from reaching from point A to point B kind of start decreasing. So we see that the throughput that you are expecting to get from the system start decreasing as in your work in progress in that system keep increasing. So there is a fine balance between these two. So we need to know what is the fine balance where you will get the best throughput for the number of work in progress items which is there in that state. And let's take the, if you go back to the example of a road, and you know that when you are moving from a point A to point B, the road is not the same all the way. You have various different stages. You have roads which are like 3-laned. You have roads which are single lane. And in each of these lanes, the work in progress limit and the throughput you can get will change based on the capacity of that specific state. The same basically applies into your software development pipeline. As your work items move through the software development pipeline, at each stage you have a work in progress limit beyond which actually your ability to move a feature from the new state all the way till done state start decreasing. So when you do Kanban, one of the objectives you will be focusing on is to identify that work in progress limit which will help you to move your feature package from the state of new to the state of done in the most effective way. So one of the starting point could be the number of people that you have in the team. So if you have like 2 people who are working on the business, working as a business analyst, maybe you might start by setting up your work in progress limit in the analyzed status 4. You might have like 2 or 3 developers, and you might set your work in progress limit as 6. And once you start looking at the flow, try to understand where is the bottlenecks in your flow, and you will keep improving your work in progress limit so that you reach a work in progress limit for each of these different states, which give you an ideal flow from the state A to state B. Here, moving from a feature which is there in the new state all the way till the done state. So the difference with this approach, with the conventional approach, is the fact that here your focus is not on how many tickets a business analyst is basically completing in every day. Your focus is here to make sure that a feature which is getting into your backlog, which is here into the new state, moves all the way till the done state in the shortest possible time. So we basically talked about your flow being smooth and your flow being fast. So your objective is consistently to accomplish these 2 goals. So once you bring this constraint into your flow, start creating the WIP limit for each of the various stages in your flow, and you start observing your flow. The flow will start revealing the bottlenecks, which will help you to kind of identify actions to make incremental and evolutionary changes into your process. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Kanban doesn't force you to change your process. You might be using a traditional process, or you might be using one of your homegrown process. The idea here is to basically visualize the workflow which is already there in your system, and helps you to identify where is the bottlenecks. so that you can focus on those bottlenecks and try to eliminate those bottlenecks so that from a customer's perspective, he or she can basically accomplish the value in the shortest period of time. So what happens when a specific stage reaches the work in progress limit? So if you look at this slide, you can see the phase of testing has a work in progress limit of 3. Now, as the features go through your Kanban board, once the number of features which is there in the testing phase reaches 3, the testers stop pulling any more work items from the development team. So 3 is the work in progress limit for the testing team. So testing team on reaching their work in progress limit stops taking any more items from the development. As a result of that, the development will soon reach their work in progress limit, and they will in turn stop pulling the items from the analyzed state. And you can very well guess if the bottleneck in the testing stage remains there for a long time, your entire development pipeline comes to a halt. So what is the advantages of that? Basically, when your entire development line basically comes to a halt, all the focuses comes to the testing and try to identify what is that stopping the testing team in able to finish a feature so that it can be pulled from the done state for the release. So all the team swarm towards the test team and try to identify the root causes of that problem and try to fix those problems so that the flow is again restored. And once the flow is restored, the features again moves into the release to the done state, and from there to the production, helping the customers to get value in the shortest period of time from the development. Now in case if you don't build that constraint in the testing, the developers will continue building more and more features, which is basically adding no value from a customer's perspective. Customer is not really getting any value from the number of features a developer creates or developer completes. If he completes the coding of 6 features or 7 features, is not going to make an impact to the customer. For a customer, the impact is the feature that is coming into the live production system, which he can start using. So from a Kanban perspective, the focus is always to bring that value to the customers in the shortest period of time. And for accomplishing this, Kanban consistently try to focus on the lead time, and one of the metrics which we focus on in Kanban is the lead time. So this is the time it takes for a feature to get into the system and finally get out to the customer's hand. The more the lead time, the more you have the opportunity to optimize your flow. So let me try to kind of summarize what we discussed so far. So regardless of whatever be the process that you are following, you can basically apply the framework of Kanban on top of it by identifying the various steps that you are following in your process, and then try to define the flow. And once you define the flow, you will try to introduce constraints into the various stages in your flow based on your understanding, so that you will understand and will be able to uncover the bottlenecks in your flow. As you remove the bottlenecks, as you increase your understanding about the system, you will keep changing your work in progress limit so that you can at one point of time accomplish a flow which is smooth and which is fast also. At the end of the day, the focus of the flow is to help the customers to get the value in the shortest effective time. So you know now how the work items flow through a Kanban board, but we know that all the work items are of not the same type. You will have different type of work items, and the expectations and the standards for each of these work items will be different. So you need to basically define the classes of service based on what impact that brings into the business. David, in his books, basically recommend you to start with 4 different type of service levels, but you need not be constrained by these 4 service levels. You can basically bring your own. So one of the service levels that David discusses in his book is the expedite service level, which is more like a production critical issues. You are working on some of the features. A production issue comes in, you know that you need to basically stop whatever you are doing and fix the production issue. So this kind of issues is basically represented by a white sticky note, where the service level agreement usually will be something less than 24 hours. Based on your team's requirement, based on your customers' expectations, you will be able to define the policies for your different levels of services. So expedite are basically the type, the classes of services where there is an immediate need to do action, and it supersedes in terms of priority all the other items which are there in your pipeline. Fixed delivery date are mostly the items which basically have a due date. For example, there is a compliance related change and your system needs to be ready before a specific date. Most of the issues which falls into this category comes under the fixed delivery date. And anything that doesn't fall into this, you can basically put it in standard class, where there will be an average time of delivery that you are expecting, and there is expectations in terms of the on-time delivery, as well as how much time it takes for a feature which is of the type standard to move from the initial state all the way till the end of your pipeline. There is a 4th level where there is no constraint on this type of work items in terms of an end date, but you wanted to kind of make that change anyway. So even if you do it now, or you do it 2 weeks down the lane or 1 month down the lane, it doesn't really impact you in terms of the value it brings from a customer's perspective, but that's something that you need to do. So if your software is currently at like 1.6 and you wanted to move it to 1.7, as long as that there is a support for the version 1.6, you don't have the need to immediately upgrade to 1.7. So these are the features of the work items which falls into this category. You can put into the classes of service which falls under intangible. Again, this is a starting point. Depending upon what your organization practices, how you follow, you will be able to come up with all your level, your different levels of classes of service. But it is important in Kanban to define these various different classes of service. It should be explicit, and the people who are working in the system should have the same understanding of these classes of service. So that when a person sees an expedite item getting into your backlog, he knows that that needs to be taken up immediately, and it supersedes any other standard class work items which is there in your backlog. So that basically are the various steps involved in defining a Kanban flow in an organization. As I mentioned in the beginning, you don't have to basically introduce a new process. Whatever process that you are following, you need to basically understand the value stream maps, and you can overlay the Kanban visual dashboard on top of it so that you will be able to understand the bottlenecks and remove it so that your flow is smooth. Most of the organization have their own different classes of service. You can start by using the same classes of service, and as you learn more, you will be able to kind of optimize and incrementally change it. Now we understand how you can implement Kanban. The question is, where is it suited? What are the ideal scenarios where Kanban might be the right methodology? We already know that there are enough software development methodology. You have Scrum, you have extreme programming. So when would be an ideal fit for Kanban? So one of the areas which would be an ideally suitable for Kanban would be the event-driven development. I don't really remember where I got the term event-driven development, but event-driven development are developmental activities which is triggered as a result of an event occurring. Let's look at some of the scenarios where which kind of fits into this scenario. One is the help desk and the support activities. One of the users is trying to use your application online and he or she is not able to make the payment. He gives you a call to your help desk. That is an event which triggers an action from your end. A very similar kind of activities you can see in application support and maintenance project. If you are doing sustainable engineering, you might have applications which are there in the production and actively used by users. Now one of the challenges in these scenarios are, if you are following a development methodology like Scrum, you might have like planned 5 or 6 enhancement requests or 2 to 3 bugs as a part of the delivery commitment for a sprint. Now what usually happens is, at the beginning of the sprint, the team spend time to do the sprint planning, understand the size of each of the stories, and commit what they can deliver at the end of the sprint. But as the sprint progress, by day 2 or by day 3, excuse me, there is an event that might be triggered in the production. Could be a production issue which might be of critical in nature, which basically requires the team to halt what they are doing and focus on that issue. So all the effort that the team does in terms of the sprint planning becomes a waste. At least some part of it becomes a waste. And what the team basically committed to deliver at the end of the sprint, it also goes for a toss. And if this becomes a continuous scenario, it also starts impacting morale of the team. The team will start questioning the logic of creating an sprint planning and the value you are getting by actually spending the time in doing your estimations. This is another scenario where the events that's triggered outside your scope decides and changes your priority pretty dynamically. The third scenario where this basically applies is if you are developing a software which is driven by the market. Especially if you are a lean startup and you are building a product and you are looking at the market to tell you what are the features that needs to be there in the product. It doesn't make sense for you to spend a lot of time to define all the features that's needed in your product. It also doesn't really make sense for you to kind of wait for a sprint to get the feedback from your customers. Let me give you one specific example. Let's assume that you are developing a product and you try to understand what is the value you are going to get by using a login mechanism provided by like a Google or a Facebook IDs. So you wanted to know whether your software should have the capability where the users can log in using Facebook or a Google ID or a Twitter ID. Now how to know whether there is a value in introducing that feature into your software development? You can basically follow two approaches. One, where you build the entire functionality at the end of your sprint, which is if it is for a 1 month, at the end of the month you deliver that into the market, and then you might realize that your users are not comfortable to share their Facebook ID or a Google ID, and they prefer the old way of logging in through a user ID and password. Now the other approach is you can basically introduce a small version of that where you will allow the users to basically log in through one of their IDs and see what is the kind of adoption that that feature has in the customers, and then introduce the capability with more login mechanisms using IDs like a Facebook or a Twitter. Now the constraints with the second approach, if you are following a Scrum, is you need to wait for the first sprint to over for the users to get the login using the Google ID, wait for the feedback from the customer, so your sprint 2 is also gone, and based on that feedback, the feature is going to come and be available to the users only at the end of a sprint 3. That's basically 3 months for you if your sprint length is 1 month, and if you're working on a product, especially in a competitive market, that's a lot of time you are giving to your competitors. So in this scenario, Kanban might be a more appropriate tool where you will be able to consistently look at the priorities and pick up the features based on what is your work in progress limit, so that your focus is to bring the feature in the shortest cycle time to your users, get the feedback from the market, and then decide what is the next feature that you want to pick up. So in all these 3 scenarios, the sum of the common characteristics that you could see is the nature of the demand. In all these 3, it is pretty difficult for you to determine clearly what is going to be the demand. In the case of an application support and maintenance, if you pick up 2 features and start working on it, there might be a production issue that come later, which basically will get a higher priority compared to what is already there in your bucket. So demand is always determined by the events that's happening outside your control. So in those scenarios, excuse me, it makes more sense to focus on limiting your work in progress limit, which will help you to enable a flow so that your work items reaches customers faster, and thereby you will be able to introduce a predictive delivery mechanism into your system. So instead of, so if you are providing a support to an existing application, instead of focusing on working on fixing all the bugs, you can basically set a class level agreement that every week you will basically provide closure of 2 to 3 major issues, 2 minor issues, and 3 or more critical issues. What those issues can be determined by your Kanban board and the priority in which it comes into your Kanban board. So the team always pick up the top priority which is there in the Kanban board in your start state, and it flows from there. So the customers always get the maximum value. At the same time, you are not really, your team is not really pushed to the wall by the consistent change in the requirements. So we already talked about one of the advantages of the Kanban. That's from a customer's perspective, where the biggest value for a customer is his or her ability to get the value in the shortest period of time. There is also an advantage that we talked about. That's more from a team's perspective, where the team is not really bombarded with a lot of issues. As you are basically limiting the work in progress item at each of the state, the team is only working on the items which is basically limited by the work in progress limit. And after the result of it, they will be able to focus on that item and to push the item into the next level. Other team is focusing on only the items which is there in their hand, and their focus is not on starting the next item, but to finish the item which is there on their hand. The items started moving much faster through your flow. So from your business or a customer's perspective, they start getting responses much faster to their issues the moment that issue is basically getting into the system. But these are the advantages that you get by using Kanban from a business standpoint view. But one of the advantages, or the biggest advantage that Kanban basically brings in, is slightly different. So what usually happens once you visualize your flow and encourages your team to start using Kanban flow, is that as the work items start moving through the workflow, your work items gets blocked at one state, your entire development pipeline is going to get a halt. This start forcing the team to do collaboration so that the bottleneck is removed much faster. So by the design itself, Kanban basically forces collaboration across the team with the intention of removing the bottlenecks much faster and the most effective way. So few of the ways. For example, there is a bottleneck in the testing team, and the team the testing team is basically stuck with completing the testing of the 3 items. And if the development team is already reached its work in progress limit, they can actually contribute to the testing to ensure that the flow is re-established in the pipeline. Instead of the development team continue creating more work items, completing those work items and creating more wastage in the pipeline. So this is an evolving behavior which you usually see in most of the Kanban team. So Kanban is a simple framework, and once you start applying this framework, it becomes an adaptive system and basically start showing behaviors which helps the team to improve the way they deliver value to the customers. And one of the major side effect is the collaboration that usually start happening in the team. The second and one of the another benefit that you would get by implementing Kanban is the ability to continuously improve, or bringing the kaizen culture. Kanban has the ability to bring change into your current process or current software development methodology in a way which is least resistant to the change. So when you are basically implementing Kanban, it doesn't require you to change the existing process, it doesn't require you to change the existing roles, it doesn't require you to change the existing ceremonies, and you will still be able to apply Kanban on the top of it. So the resistance to change usually will be the least across the various different software development methodologies that you have. And the transition that happens to the team becomes more effective, and as over a period of time, the team starts seeing the flow of the work package, and as the team start identifying the bottlenecks, your process start getting more effective. So so that basically brings the kaizen culture where the team continuously focus on improvement. So bringing Kanban and putting that overlay on your process is not sufficient. You need to also bring the culture of continuous improvement where you consistently look at your flow and you consistently try to identify the ways to improve and optimize your flow. So the culture of kaizen or the culture of continuous improvement is the second biggest impact you will get and you will see in your team as a result of implementing the Kanban. Now you know these are the benefits of implementing the Kanban. You also know how you can basically go ahead and implement Kanban. Now the question is, what are the first steps? So David basically suggests 3 fundamental principles to start the implementation of a Kanban in an organization. Again, Kanban is mostly an adaptive system which basically emerge, and as a result of which each team which does Kanban would be doing it slightly differently. You will see difference in terms of how each of the team is basically implementing their own Kanban boards. So the 3 fundamental principles David suggests to follow is to start with what you do now. Instead of making a drastic change and big changes into the process, into the roles or into the system. Start with you have right now and commit to pursue incremental and evolutionary change. And when you start implementing the Kanban, start with the respect to the current process and the roles. Kanban doesn't force you to change the current roles, process or ceremonies or anything. You can start with whatever you have then and there, and then basically improve over a period of time. So these 3 steps basically help you to start implementing Kanban in an organization. And with that slide, basically we are coming to the end of the presentation. I think we are still have 5 more minutes. So we'll try to get into the question and answer session. Before that, if you have any more question and if you have anything that you would like to clarify, you can see my mail ID. You can get in touch with me. I will be more than happy to answer your questions. I also maintain a blog. You can visit my blog and share your thoughts there also. So with that, Adadana, I think I will hand it over to you and we can start the question and answer session.
Of course, Manoj. Thanks for the insightful presentation. Let's quickly take up the questions now. I request you to read out the questions and their answers so that all our users may listen to your insights. So are you able to see the question in your questions doc?
1 second. Yeah.
Start taking them one by one.
Yeah, I'm just going through the question. Just give me a minute. Okay. So the first question is from Hemant. The question is, heard Kanban somewhere. Can Kanban combine with the Agile methodologies and how effective is it? So yes, I mean there are many scenarios where Kanban is basically combined with the many aspects of Scrum, and that's basically what usually called a Scrum Ban. So you maintain most of the ceremonies which is there in the Scrum, and at the same time you use the visual dashboard as well as the flow to help the team to identify how effectively you can flow the work items. Also to help the team to identify where is bottlenecks getting introduced in their software development. So Scrum Ban is, I would say, effective, and what I have seen is most of the development people don't use Kanban alone. You basically bring in some of the concepts from Scrum. So Scrum Ban, I would say, is one of the effective ways to do product development, especially if you are more into a product development versus more into maintenance and support projects. The second question was in slide number 2, what is the number for each feature? We saw different colors for each blocks. Does this represent green, amber and red state for that feature? Let me quickly go to the slide number 12. So I'm assuming the question is regarding the numbers associated with each feature. If that is the question, that's just to indicate the various features. Since I try to kind of create it for the purpose of a presentation, I try to differentiate each feature with a number. But if the question is regarding the number associated with each of the various different states in the flow, that basically represents your work in progress limit. So in this slide, 5 for analyzed indicate that at any time the number of maximum items, work items that can be in the analyzed state is 5. The moment you reach 5, you should stop taking up, or you should stop pulling any more features from the upstream state. I hope that answers the question. So I'm moving to the next question. How can Kanban be best leveraged in a product development mode? So as I mentioned, Kanban is really effective, especially if you are developing a product and when you are developing a product, if you are developing a product which is pretty much well established and you know exactly what is the requirements for that features, you know exactly what you need to develop, maybe you can still use Kanban, but I wouldn't say there is a lot of value add. But let's assume that you are into a product development and your product, what features that you want to include in those features, there's a lot of ambiguity, or you are basically depending upon your customers' feedback and you are trying to evolve your feature development based on what customers provides you as a feedback. Especially if you are in a lean startup, you might be using the concept of a minimum viable product. You will be building a minimum viable product, putting that into market, see how the users are responding to that, and you should try to evolve your software development or evolve your product development based on the customer feedback. So in those scenarios, but there is a lot of learning from the customers, there is a lot of learning from the market, because the product is kind of maybe disruptive in nature and there is not a lot of available product from which you can compare and try to understand what are the features which will add value to the customers. So in those scenarios, Kanban makes a lot of sense. It helps you to put a feature into production in the shortest period of time. It helps you to get feedback from your customers and from your end users in the shortest period of time, and as a result of which you can consistently keep your product backlog updated and groomed to meet the best value which you will get from the product. I think we have time for one more question. Other than that, how much time we have?
Yes, so we have 1 minute with us. So if you would like to take one last question and then sum up the session for today, you can do it now.
Sure. So when there is a large number of expedite service, how to handle? So there are two, I would suggest basically to define, one thing that you can do is when you are defining your flow, you can basically split and you can basically introduce various, what you call it as a swim lanes, where based on your understanding about the number of expedite service can keep different percentage or different capacity. For example, let me see if I can do that in this screen. So if you have a larger number of expedite, you know that you cannot keep a work in progress limit of 1. So what you would do is, just give me a minute. So what you would do is you would split your Kanban board, where you would say I will keep 30% of my capacity or 30% of the Kanban board for the expedite items. Now if you close beyond that, I think what Kanban suggests you to do is, if it's consistently increasing, your expedite items are consistently increasing, Kanban is not only allowing you to improve the flow of the work items, it also is a way of identifying the root causes of your bottleneck. So you have to do a root cause fixes what creates such a large number of expedite items. But if you think that the nature of the business and the type of the issues are more, you can create a larger lane for taking care of expedite items alone. So I think we'll take that as the last question, and I want to thank everybody who attended the presentation. As I mentioned, again, if you have any more questions and if you want to kind of reach out, you can connect with me in my mail ID, which is displayed in the screen. And I want to thank TechGig for providing me an opportunity to do this presentation. I'll now hand over to Aradhana.
And I'm really thankful to our guest speaker today for conducting this wonderful webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Manoj, for taking the time out and having us. Have a great evening ahead.
Thank you.